Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. Hope everybody's doing well. Oh, man. Let me go ahead. I think I've got everything about ready. Well, Dr. Massengill, how are things has your school opened yet, or are you going to open in the fall?
We open in August. I've done 92 interviews in 7 days, and today I recommended 27 teachers. It's a special thing, I tell you.
Oh, good.
It's nice getting pick of the litter for once.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Are they letting you do transfers?
Yeah, it looks like I'm going to have to inherit an AP, but other than that, they've been very kind to me.
Yeah. How many APs you going to have?
Just one.
Just one? Yeah. Well, that's not the end of the world.
Not at all.
I reconstituted a junior high school and inherited, but they weren't all from the same place. I inherited three APs and one senior admin, and wasn't all bad. It can be, but usually it's not the end of the world. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right, let me get rid of that. All right, we're at Zoom session 12. Let me get to our weekly schedule. All right, I've got 7 o'clock. Make sure we're recording. We are. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to Mels 603, our usual Wednesday night session. This is Zoom session 12, week 14. Hope you had a good Easter week break. A lot of you worked all the way through. So you should be in good shape in terms of where your work is. This week we had discussion board 11, interview an administrator about fundraising. You'll probably have to do that virtually. Locate a copy of your school budget. Does it contain all 4 types of funds, state, federal, local, and school funds? And then list the 5 most important steps in school-based budgeting process. So those are the things. And so I want to speak to each of those individually, and I want to call on both of our principal experts to speak to those as well. And so I'll take them as they come. Number 11, fundraising. The biggest misconception about school fundraising is principals have this notion, and APs who are new to the game have this notion that we can delegate this to some school, auxiliary school unit, and alleviate ourselves of that headache. Nothing could be further from the actual truth. You can delegate the activity of fundraising, but not the responsibility, the financial accounting responsibility of fundraising. If that goes off the mark, they will get you for failure to maintain fiscal control, and at best you'll get demoted, at worst you'll get fired. And so this notion is we don't have to worry about fundraising. We just turn it over to the PTO. Oh, no, that's not true. If money gets missing, or people don't get their stuff, or your accounting procedures are sloppy, it will come back to roost with you. And so I'm going to start with Dr. Tobias. Welcome tonight, Dr. Tobias. I'm going to start with you for your comments on fundraising at your school.
I don't do a whole lot of fundraising just because of what you said. I don't like to be in murky waters, and I try not to have things outside of my, sphere of control. So I don't do a whole lot. Plus, partly because we're also a magnet school, and I don't have a home base. All our students come from all over the district, so it makes it really hard to fundraise. And it is a small school, so not something I tread into. Um, I don't like to give myself headaches when I don't have to. So, I mean, honestly, that's the true answer. I don't do it for that reason.
And that's absolutely right. I mean, you don't, it's a necessary evil in some places, but you certainly would not volunteer to do that, especially in a magnet situation where you don't have a core population. But
Yeah.
also you lose a lot of control, and you know, you read something every few days about the money being gone, or problems with fundraising, the accounting system. It's a level of risk that you certainly wouldn't enter into willingly. Dr. Massengill, your comments?
Yeah, I would say I've had to do a lot of fundraising because I've been at schools that did not have special program status or Title I status, and so you get your instruction supply allotment and that's it. And everybody knows that in a lot of cases that's not enough to make ends meet. Um, I I think the difficulty is from a law and a policy standpoint is that the money has to follow the children, which sometimes teachers do not like, particularly if you're raising money for an 8th grade account. The 8th graders going to the high school. What's supposed to happen? That money is either supposed to follow those kids to the high school or it's supposed to revert to the general fund. And so the teachers lose control of those funds if they help fundraise them. Culturally, it can become a difficult thing. The other piece is when you have outside groups fundraising, like a PTA, technically they're separate entities, but most board policies require some level of principal control, which means if they do something wrong, even though you have no legal responsibility for them, ethically you're still responsible for them from a school board perspective.
From a policy standpoint.
And
Thank you very.
And so what I had to do every month is they had to turn, even though they were 501c3 nonprofits, they turned their bank statements into me. I would review them. I had to look at all the canceled checks. And a lot of times they didn't like that because they didn't feel like they should have to be reporting anything to me. So a lot of times I'd have to sit down with some very powerful and influential parents and explain to them, look, even though I technically have nothing to do with this based on the IRS expectations, if something happens with this, it's my name and the district's name that's going to be in the paper along with yours. And there was a case where I had to ask for my PTA president's resignation because things were not being filed properly, and the 990EZ did not get filed with the IRS. And when the state PTA board comes calling, if the president doesn't call, their next call is to the principal of the school, even though technically you have nothing to do with it. So I try to do as little as I can for those very reasons. But you have to have tight control over those policies and know what the expectation is. And the other thing generally is you won't get in trouble for the school-based fundraisers if the money's not following the children until you get in trouble. And so no one's going to pay attention to it until you have a state audit. And then you have a state audit and they find out that money wasn't following the children and you're in hot water, even if you're not the principal. If you were the principal while that was happening, you're in a lot of trouble.
That is correct. And thank you for that setup. So to that end, let me go back to share screen. What I have pulled up for you is as Dr. Massengill alluded to, let me get that proper document here. In terms of the IRS, they may be a separate 503, but here's what happens. Every district, the school board passes fundraising policy that makes it your business. And so I have one from Charlotte-Mecklenburg here. And so you need to look for this in your district when you do this, when the fundraising, talking about, you need to know what the policy is. You need to research the fundraising policy for your district. That's what Dr. Massengill was talking about. Even though your booster club may be a separate 503B nonprofit, the board says you will be responsible for that, not the IRS. That's the 503B is for the IRS. But your local board says this is how you will do fundraising, regardless of who at your school does it, whether a separate entity or not, doesn't matter. These are the policies that you will follow. And so they're all pretty much somewhat similar across the state, but you need to look at yours. But this is the one in the district I worked in last and the longest. The last 20 years of my career, I worked in CMS, and so here they are. And it has all the accounting procedures. All fundraising involving schools shall be the responsibility of the principal. Tells you very first sentence whose responsibility it is to monitor all fundraising and follow the accounting procedures of the district. Very first sentence, it tells you this is on you. Don't matter it's your PTA, your booster club, it does not matter. The very first sentence, it tells you you're responsible for all of it. And so all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, I delegated that to them. No, that's not what the policy says. School board policy says it is the principal. And you will follow all fundraising will follow the accounting procedures of the district. And it tells you what you can do, has to be approved by you, and then that has to go to the superintendent for the superintendent's office approval for all fundraisers before they happen. The types, the things that they will approve, they tell you right here. Recommend to encourage community club, class, or school participations, art festivals, carnivals, dances, car wash, barbecues, concerts. Nowhere does it say selling candy in there. Doesn't say that. That's not allowable. And so they tell you what they'll approve up front. No use of instructional time. Can't use instructional time for fundraising. You can't use your auto mechanics or your cosmetology in high school to raise money. You only do that to offset costs. Can't do that. You got to do tickets just like athletic contests. If you're doing a fundraiser like a donkey basketball game or a womanless wedding or whatever, you've still got to sell tickets, and you have to do the accounting on those. All monies have to be deposited and receipted daily. I said deposited and receipted daily. You take money in, you've got to receipt it. It's got to be deposited that day. And under no circumstances will money be left at school overnight. Receipts have to be deposited in the school account on a daily. It means your bookkeeper's got to log it in every day. They can't just let it wait till the end of the fundraiser's over with and then go in and put it in the books. Nope, it has to be receipted daily as well. All funds shall be used to the benefit of the school program. All funds shall be used designated prior to fundraising. That means you got to have approval up front, and you can only do it. You can only use it for what you said you were going to use it for. You are expressly prohibited from soliciting or selling any non-school authorized item during work time or in a work area. Selling, trading, distributing, or dealing instructional supplies, equipment, or reference books in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg. So you can't do those kinds of things to raise money. You can't tutor for compensation students who you regularly teach, have administrative or supervisory responsibility. You can't get any kind of compensation during work hours. You're prohibited from soliciting customers or clients or engaging in any private business or service while on the property of the Board of Education or using their vehicles, materials, supplies, resources, fund, equipment for such activities inside or outside of regular hours. So if you've got a photography studio, you can't use that to raise money either, and you can't do private businesses or one-off jobs doing those things. And so you need to understand fundraising is a double-edged sword, and most of the time the edge it gets you more than it's almost not worth it. If you're like in Dr. Tobias's case, if you're in a place where you don't have to, you certainly wouldn't choose to. So fundraising is a necessary evil in some places, but it's still an evil. And so what I want you to understand about fundraising, and the reason I have that one in there is although you may have separate entities on your campus, you're still responsible. That's by board policy. You cannot escape that responsibility. You can delegate the activity and not the responsibility. I have a story that goes with that one. One of my first administrative jobs, I was an AP. The PTA mounted a fundraiser that was unsuccessful. Got the principal to kind of bail them out, and everybody was happy until the state auditors came, as Dr. Massengill just mentioned. And the money didn't follow the students, and she lost her job. Everything was fine locally until the state auditors came, and then it was not fine. So that's what I need for you to know about fundraising. I'm going to pause and catch my breath here and see if anybody has any questions about fundraising. All right. If we have no questions on fundraising, I'm going to move on to the next one.
Dr. Lamb?
Yes.
Is that why so many schools do like spirit nights where, local restaurants or whatever will give a certain percentage to the school?
And then you have to account for that money is even then, yes. But boards of education like those kinds of activities because they're community-based, but you still have to, what money they turn into you, you have to account for that money. You don't have to account for the actual selling piece of it, but you have to, once they hand it to you, you have to account for that money. But yes, that's why they encourage those community-based activities. A lot of schools have gone to those things because of the headache of the depositing, the receipting, and all that stuff. But you're still responsible to account for the money once it comes to you. That's a good question, Mary. Absolutely. Yes, that's why they suggest you do community-based things. It takes a lot of the work away from you and limits your exposure. Certainly, yes. Great question. Discussion board 12, list the 5 most important steps in the school-based budgeting process. That should be a conversation with your school principal or an administrator at your school. It shouldn't just be what you think. That one should be a conversation with that interview of that administrator you talked to about fundraising. At the same time, you should talk to them about the most important steps in the school-based budgeting process. And what I'm looking for there is there's 100 different important things, but at the end of the day, does the school-based budget from all sources of monies, do they support the academic program, the school improvement plan? That's what you're looking for. Remember that triangle we talked about, that school management is based on a triangle. The budget and the master schedule have to support the school improvement plan, which is the academic initiative for your school. That school improvement plan follows the district strategic plan. It also looks at your test scores and your performance data that we did last semester. We did the app sale last semester and looked at our performance data, and then we set upon a professional development plan to try to improve our instructional program. Well, this semester we learned master schedule plays a big part in that. That's one of the supporting legs. The other is the budget has to support that as well. All those initiatives that we came up with last semester have to be supported now through how we schedule and who teaches what. And then also we have to put our money where our mouth is. And so what I'm looking for in those 5 most important steps is that somehow that we understand that triangle, that we can come up with, we can look at our data and know where we're deficient. But if we don't put our best teachers, the teachers get the scores in those areas, we've defeated the purpose of doing the data analysis. We came up with this plan, but if we don't fund it, again, we won't succeed school performance wise. Academically, we won't succeed. And so our budget, we have to understand that all the monies that come into our school, that the ultimate goal of that money is to support that academic program. That's what we're looking for. And then, and I'll go back again to Dr. Tobias for comments on that, how to put all this management piece together, the master schedule, and now the budget, how that supports the academic program.
So one of the things that I do like, it's that collaborative piece. So our budget first is driven by the leadership team. So we all sit and discuss where the budget goes. If there's a weakness in a certain department, say for example, language arts is lacking in books, sometimes everybody will defer to say, well, we'll allow language arts to take our money, or technology or something. The budget is never a decision I make on my own. It does support the whole school system, and it is a collaborative effort. I don't want to get into a place where teachers begin to say that I'm spending money and I'm not spending it wisely. So I always make sure that it is a group effort. One of the running jokes I do have with my bookkeeper, though, is I tell her if I'm fired, she's fired. So
Yeah.
And she hears that at least once a month. If I'm fired, you're fired. And so she's like, I don't want to be fired. I was like, okay, well, then do what we have to do. So a good relationship. But once we get through with the basic necessities of the school in the budget, we take that off top. Paper, pens, things like that, basic stuff. Then we go to academic needs. And that goes before the leadership team, not me. And they make those hard decisions along with myself.
And excellent. And if you all will remember that when you did the first thing that we did was OMA Task 1 this semester, and the last thing that we looked at, we asked you to clearly describe your school's budgeting process and procedures. And within that description, we wanted to know what amount of participation the school personnel and the school improvement team have in that budgeting decision. And that's what Dr. Tobias was just talking about. It should not be the principal's decision. Your leadership team should be making those decisions in the budgeting process of once you got enough paper for your copy machine and enough ink or toner, where are we going to put our resources? Because who develops the school improvement plan? The school improvement team. That is their primary function, is to develop and carry out the school improvement plan is done by the school improvement team. That's why they have to be the people who decide how you spend your discretionary money. It has to support them and their plan. Can't just be the principal, I want this, I want that. No, it has to be that team has to support, again, that base the budget has to support that school improvement plan. Come back, Dr. Tobias.
I'm smart enough to know that the teacher working condition survey addresses that. So you want to get dinged real hard on that, just ignore the collaborative piece, because teachers will be quick to ding you to say, well, you didn't tell us about the budget, or we don't know anything. Well, I have learned over time. I did get dinged in my younger in the profession. So I stopped doing that to make sure that I include a group of folks in working through the budget.
Yeah, and so if you don't do the right things, there's 12 areas on the teacher working condition survey. I've got 2 pulled up for tonight to show you where you're going to get dinged on facilities. But yes, if you don't, under school leadership, they ask about that. They ask that very question. And if you don't collaborate with the school improvement team on the budget, they'll wear you out. And so it's the right thing to do because it's the right thing to do, but also it's a self-preservation activity as well. If you don't do that, they'll wear you out. That will not go well when you have your performance review, because it is required by law. We went over that first week. 115C, 284, duties and responsibilities of the principal, you got to have a school improvement team, and they got to develop a school improvement plan. And the budget is part, and the budget, you got to develop the budget as well with that group. The law says you have to do that, and they check on that. The state checks on that with the teacher working condition survey. And so if you don't do it, you're going to get dinged. Dr. Massengill? Is he still with us, or have we lost him? Dr. Massengill, you're muted. Are you still with us? We're having a little problem here, looks like. But you've got to involve them in how you use that money. And so if you don't do that, it will come back to haunt you. And so when you're looking at the 5 most important steps in the budgeting process, they've all got to lead back to the school improvement team and the school improvement plan. All right. And so all right. And so, and then the last task that you have to do this week is you've got to locate a copy of your budget. Now, if somebody tells you we don't make that public, that's not true. The only thing that we don't make public is maybe people's names and salaries, but we do have to make the school budget is a public document. As you found out, again, duties, responsibilities of the principal. 115C 284 says that you will have copies of the budget available to parents and other interested parties. It is a public document. So find your school's budget and see if it makes sure that your school is tracking. And that's what Dr. Tobias was talking about. If I get fired, you get fired. You've got to have a bookkeeper that is able to track all of your funds. And it can't just be here and there. You need a modified accrual accounting system, but you've got to have the system that your district uses. You should be able to track your state, your federal, your local, and your school funds at any time. You should be able to know where you are with those. Tracking funds is not just purchasing. That's part of it, but you need to be able to track those funds at any time. So you need a comprehensive document that has all of these funds in it for the entire year from all the sources that you get funds from. If you don't have that, if they're in separate and disparate documents, the chances of something going wrong are much greater than if you have them in a comprehensive document where you can monitor all of them each month, each week. So hopefully you'll be able to find that document. All right. Anybody have any questions on this week's activities and about fundraising specifically? Fundraising is one that gets you, or misspending your money, not knowing what your budgets are and what they can be used for, or as Dr. Tobias pointed out, not involving your school improvement team to support your school improvement plan. You get dinged on that one. So those are your cautionary tales. Money gets you quickly in this business. If you're not a good steward of public monies, you get got. Okay, let me catch this chat right quick and we'll move on. Shawana said that her school is certainly struggling because they were mid fundraiser when they closed. Yeah. That's certainly a problem. These are new problems for a new era, but if you were in the middle of a fundraiser and things close, it's going to be difficult to recoup that money.
We were able to get some of it when we did our laptop deployment. The community was nice enough to turn in the money, but not what we were planning to receive from the sale. So there'll be some changes come August on what we're able to do with the budget. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of schools, they have those kinds of things, especially on those technology initiatives. Everybody needs to understand that technology is capital. Just like buildings are capital, technology is considered to be capital. And the local has to come up with that money. You get a little state technology money, but not enough to buy hardware. Usually that money, and I'll let the principal speak to that. Usually that money, I was sitting on the state school board last 2 or 3 Fridays, and we're talking about some of these kinds of things. And part of the problem is a lot of that state money for technology goes to software and platform vendors, and it doesn't go to the hardware. And that's where we're lacking, is in hardware. They were talking about, how many $1 million was going to, what is it, IMAP. Anyway, it's different technology platforms. State generally buys those kinds of things. The money doesn't filter down to individual schools and districts to buy the hardware. And so that's generally where your fundraising lies. As Shawana said, so yeah, that can be a problem if you have to come up with your own money for your own hardware on a lot of these one-to-one initiatives and other things. Unless you get grant monies or local businesses support that, it's difficult to raise that money. I did Santa Claus for a little small elementary school in the northern part of Cleveland County, where Gardner Webb is located, Kaiser Elementary. And we did pictures with Santa. We gave scholastic books to every kid in school. I went to every room. We did pictures in the library, and we raised enough money for 15 Chromebooks. And that's what that fundraiser was for. Pictures with Santa was to try to get Chromebooks in their building. They're trying to do a one-to-one initiative, but they don't have the hardware, or the district doesn't have the money to do that. And so the school, we were able to raise enough for 15 more Chromebooks. It's a small elementary with just under 300 students, about 285 students. But even still, 285 Chromebooks, they cost $235 each. You do the math, how much money that is. It's $500,000. I'm pretty popular Santa Claus, but I can't raise $500,000. We got 15, and in that community that was a big thing for them. And so, yeah, you got to do kind of things like that. We had community members in, and we spent the whole day. It was a good day, but that's the kind of things you have to do. All right, so let me get back on my share here. So our materials for the week, a couple of things I want to talk about, and this flows right into, and it also flows into what our case study on Leandro is financing education equity or disparity. And one of the things that our 2 principals with us tonight have already pointed out, there's inequities even within districts in financing in terms of how much money you have. And so, the question is it desirable to equalize educational spending? And so we talked about that in the Leandro case, in that, should the money be equal in the end? That's a really good notion, but we don't have enough money to make that happen, because districts are independent of one another in counties. And it's hard to say to one county, we're going to take money from your county and give it to another county. And the state has obviously disallowed that. Now they're trying to find ways to add more money, the lottery being chief among those, but that's not really been the financial windfall that was claimed. And so the issue is always going to be in school funding is you've got a base amount of money, and what can you do beyond that to actually provide the things that your students need. The states are only going to give you enough for a basic education. They aren't going to give you enough to do the things that you really need to do. You've got to figure out ways to do that. Hence, in low wealth districts and schools of poverty and schools that that don't have a lot, you may have to fundraise some to try to get the things that you need. You may have to, bring me in as Santa Claus and get a few Chromebooks. I know that's kind of facetious, but I mean, you're going to have to try to figure out ways to get what you can for your students. You aren't just going to be able to have all the money that you need. But then on the other hand, fundraising is such a double-edged sword. It's going to be that's almost a separate job in itself nowadays. We still haven't come to the recognition or realization that we need to give more money because we have to take from one to give to the other. As Dr. Massengill pointed out tonight that we did Leandro, there is a little Leandro money, but it's only in certain districts and it's very limited. And it's kind of pork barrel. It doesn't come all the time. It's kind of flat grants. And so these are the issues that you're going to have to deal with. I'm not going to go through all these slides tonight, but I do have a slideshow on this. It's obviously under session 12 under Zoom financing education, and it kind of encapsulates the Leandro argument if you want to spend some time with that. So we'll move on from that one. And so here's kind of our problem. Because of the continual increases in funds allocated to publication by most of the states, local control is slowly decreasing. Now, I would argue that that's not true, but what they're saying is because states give you money per pupil, they want more and more control. They expect more and more things, but that encumbers you for more and more stuff. For example, the assessment tool that has to be used with the software that the state buys and requires you to do all this assessment of K2 students requires a big input of capital on your part to buy all the equipment to do that. And so you say, well, it seems like the state's giving less and less money. They are giving less money overall, but because of the money that they're giving, it's unfunded mandates and things that you have to pay for as well. And that's causing a lot of crises and conflict at the local level itself. Rural areas obviously are the most hit because we know that property taxes and corporate taxes is where money comes from to the county commissioners that's given to school. We know that local school budgets are dwindling because of economic conditions of moving manufacturing out of, offshoring manufacturing and businesses. Most businesses now that relocate to an area want tax-free, just like when Facebook built a server farm in Rutherford County. They got tax-free in perpetuity and didn't bring that many jobs. And what they brought were low wage jobs. And so those are the kinds of things that we're battling. And so every time a state or local gives economic incentives to corporations or companies to move to their area, that incentive money comes directly out of the budget for schools, because that's where that money is used for local monies. And so we've seen a major decrease in the amount of local money over the last 2 decades in public education in this century. It's only about a third of what it one time was in terms of the local monies. But that's what happens. And so every time you see, well, Eden's getting a new Miller Brewing plant, you think, well, that's going to bring economic prosperity. But if they have to give them money for them to come, that means schools don't get that money. And so that's kind of the way that works. If you want to work through this slideshow as well, it kind of explains that argument on funding as well. We've talked about it at length, and so I'll move on from that. What else have I got that I can do? I want to hit some budget laws and some accounting things right quick. We've covered most of this semester, but I want to bring home the point. The state of North Carolina operates on the modified accrual accounting system. You have to deposit all monies, no money overnight, all those things. You have to track all your budgets. But the thing that I want to talk specifically about in that is you don't get the money up front. When the state says that they're going to give you $7,000 per pupil, I've covered this before, but let me reiterate, they give you 10 monthly installments of 700, and they subtract your absentee rate. So if 95%, if your attendance was only 95% that month, you get 95% of that $700 per pupil times the number of pupils that you have. And the state pays you after the first month. You have to have enough operating capital on hand to operate the first month, and then you voucher the state and they reimburse your money. That's the way that works. And sometimes you have to revert monies that they've already given you. And so it's not like you can just go out and spend whatever you want to. If you don't spend the money as it's intended to be, if it's the line items in the budget aren't spent correctly at the school level or at the district level, the state will not reimburse that money. They don't give you the money, you spend it wrong and then holler for it back. They don't give it to you until after you spend it, they reimburse you. That's the way that system works. That's very important to understand, that your district is on the hook for the money if it's misspent improperly. The state just won't reimburse it. So you need to understand that. You've got a local finance officer, you've got a school finance officer, which is normally your financial secretary. All money has to be spent by the rules that it's intended to be spent by. If not, you won't get it back. You will lose that money. So I've got a question that came up here. All right. So Dr. Massengill's come back with us. Okay, he's good. So you get audited every year in the spring to make sure that you have spent all your money as it was intended to be spent, whether it's state money, local money, federal money, school money. All 4 accounts are audited every year to make sure that you have done the right thing, because your district can't afford for you to go out on a limb and spend money improperly and them not get it reimbursed or have to revert it back. I've told the story, and I'll tell it again, about the high school that hired a new AP that had been a new leader for new schools and had not been through a formal training process. She had just carried a clipboard and followed the principal for a year. It was one of those alternative path things. And the first thing she did when they told her at the high school where they hired her is to get the number of suspensions down. She simply didn't put them in the system. She just made her own suspension form, gave them to kids, didn't log them in. You know, you have to log into Power School and actually enter the incident in order to generate an official suspension form. Well, she wanted to get the number of suspensions down, so she didn't log them in. She made her own form and gave them to students. Well, at the end of the month, they were, you know, DPI called me and said something's wrong at this high school. They didn't enter any disciplinary incidents in that led to suspension this month. They normally have 180 or so students suspended in a month. That's their average for about 700 days. Is something wrong? I thought, well, it's got to be a technology error. Something's wrong with their, inputting system. So I went running up there, and she said, no. They said, get the numbers down. I said, when they said get the numbers down, they meant get the teachers out of their room and make sure everybody's on their supervision post and covering the hot spots and doing the things you're supposed to be doing. They didn't say suspend them and just don't tell anybody. She said, well, what's the big deal? I said, well, those 700 days were counted as days present. The state gave us money for those. We're going to have to revert that money back to the state now, because those students were counted present and they weren't in school. That's an ethical problem, a legal problem from reporting, number one. Number two, they paid us for that, all those students, and now we have to give that money back. And so we had to revert several $1,000s back, which nobody likes to do. And so, my wife asked me, said, well, what happened? I said, well, she had to go home, honey. That's that. If you defraud the state and they demand the money back, the only recourse is that's the end of you. And so, again, The state gives you money based on how much they said they were going to in 10 installments, but they subtract your absences from that. They don't pay for kids not in school today. Doesn't matter if they're on the roll or not. If they didn't come to school today, you don't get paid for them that day. And so we had a lot at that high school. We had about 700 days of students who weren't in school that were counted as present. You don't do that but once. And so I have under next week, I have all the state laws. You can see 115C of how the accounting system works, daily deposits, annual independent audit, all these things, special funds. You have a treasurer for each school. That's your financial secretary, as I said. It has all the laws of how your local accounts have to be managed and how they have to be audited. And it has all the laws, and there's a lot of them, and what has to be done. And then you have your local policies on fundraising. So this document is under next week's, but I want to make sure we hit this tonight. So you need to understand everything that you have to do with money. There is a law, a policy that says exactly what you'll do, when you'll do it, and why you'll do it. And if you step outside of that, and I put them all in one little handy dandy place for you here. You don't have to go through all 545 of them. I've gone through and pulled out every one of them that you need to know, starting with 288. You have to maintain a copy of the budget all the way through. And you can see I pulled all of the statutes out from the state. And then, as I said, you will need to go to your local district and pull up all of your policies from your board policy manual on fundraising, and they'll look much like these. And these cannot supersede what the state says. They go hand in hand with all the state policies, with the state laws, all of those individual laws from the state. And so the money, how you get it, how you disperse it, it's public information, and you have to do it the right way. And there's laws and policies that govern each individual penny of that money, regardless of what source it comes from. There's how it has to be spent. I've told the story on federal money. The federal government, CTE, said we're getting out of photography, and the local school said, we like this program and we're going to continue, so we're going to use a state-paid English position to continue teaching photography. You can't do that. It blows up your class sizes in your English classes, number one, but number two, that's not you can't use a state-funded position to do that. So that money was misspent. So that ended that principle, and that's why I was the new principal. And that's the first thing I had to do is this money was misspent. This money had to be reverted back to the state. We had to pay that teacher's salary back for an entire year. Had to be paid back to the state from this, because they didn't have that teacher assigned to as what the teacher was allotted for, which was an English position. So it's not just that you actually buy something that you weren't supposed to buy. If you assign a teacher outside of the field that they're supposed to be in and your personnel allotment, that money, and you have them teaching something else, that money has to be reverted back as well. I was in on that one myself. That's a personal one that happened to me. I had to be the one to go and tell the photography teacher, we no longer need you. We can't pay you. You can stay, but we can't pay you. I got this money. It comes for an English teacher, not for a photography teacher. And so that's how that deal went. And so all of your monies have conditions on how they are to be spent. And if you're not sure, you need to ask your finance director in your county. It's not one of those things when it comes to finance, and I'll kind of summarize here, and then we'll turn it over to our two principal experts. It is not best to ask for forgiveness rather than permission when it comes to spending money. You better ask for permission up front, because it's about your job now. Principals, you want to weigh in on that one?
They asked for permission in my building, myself included. I'm the queen for asking for forgiveness, but you know what? They always say the money or the honey. I don't have money is never is not go far. Sorry. Money get me. You know, so I'm a rebel, but I am very cautious. I tell folks, I run the school. You know, I won't say I'm the best budgeter in my home, but I do run the school as if it's my home. I don't want to be bankrupt. I don't want to be in poverty. I don't want to be any of that. So I try to be very on point when it comes to money. And I do ask for permission. It's probably one of the few things I ask for permission for.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not a great role model with that, but money I am very cautious about.
Yeah, you can't be a cowboy when it comes to the money,
No.
or a rebel or any of that. You better ask for permission. You better ask for clarification up front. You can't. There is no forgiveness on the money. They don't have any sense of humor at all about the money. Dr. Massengill?
I would just say don't make any assumptions.
Yeah.
I've had a
Good point.
interesting experience going from a small to medium district to a large district in New Hanover, because it was sort of, I got a training on the HR processes for the district, but no training on the finances, and I'm opening a new school and I've spent over $2.5 million in 6 weeks, and requisitioning stuff, and so I've had to ask a lot of questions that were just assumed that, oh, he'll figure it out. And some of the answers were surprising because it was so different from one county to the next in terms of the differences in terms of purchasing policies and how they allocate local funds and state funds. So
that's a great point. And I try to make sure that I remember to say that. Maybe I don't know. You got to know what's going on in your district, where you're working now. I worked in 4 different districts in North Carolina. One 2 low wealth, 2 high wealth. And it was completely different. And even the 2 high wealth were different, and the 2 low wealth were different. You got to find out what's happening in your district.
And I think
you got to follow that.
The other point that I would make is, if you don't trust anybody else in your building, you need to make sure that you trust your school treasurer. That person is indispensable, and go with your gut. If you feel like something is off, even if you have no reason to suspect that something's off, call finance, tell them, hey, I don't know what's going on. I just feel something's off, and request them to do an audit. They may not find anything, but if they do find something, then you've probably just saved your job because you brought it to their attention before someone else did. So just go with your gut. Those are my two tidbits.
And I would recommend that no matter how long the school finance person has been there prior to you arriving as principal, first thing I'd do is ask for an audit to make sure I knew where all the bodies were buried, where everything was before you start. Because once you take control, it's on you whether you did it or not. It's now your problem. It's going to be your problem anyway, but they're not going to blame you for it. You need to find out. Now, I had a lady who I trained her as an AP. She didn't work for me, but I was in the central office by then. I trained her as an AP. She got a principal job, and she got the audit and did all the things that she was supposed to do, and everything was fine. And she was there for 4 or 5 years, and she had a freak accident the weekend before school started and was in the hospital a big part of the fall. And when she got back, the cat had been away, so the mice played. And she got back, she didn't ask for an audit, but she'd been out about 4 months and didn't ask for an audit, assumed that things were just going to be going, would just continue to go fine. And at the spring audit, they discovered that her bookkeeper had embezzled all the money that she could get her hands on because the principal hadn't been there. She kept a job. She got demoted though, and to finish out her contract, and then that was the end of her. That's one of those things that I guess she felt like, that, I've worked with this person for 3 or 4 years and that never been a problem before, but, I don't know that you could have foresaw that happening, but I think what I would have done after having been out, I'd have asked for audit when I come back to make sure that I knew where everything was. But unfortunately, when the district came and did the annual audit, they caught it. And she'd been back about 3 months or 4 months at that time. You own it then. Did not go well. So those are the things. We've got, in the few minutes we've got left, I want to get to facilities right quick. Hopefully you got to do your facilities audit, your walkthrough. If you didn't, you can kind of do it over the phone. The things on this is what this, when I made this one myself, and I made it from experience of having to be the person in Charlotte Mecklenburg that was in charge, unfortunately, of this when they came and did state audits. If you have a school whose data is bad on persistently dangerous, they put them on a watch list for a year and they come and do a state facilities audit. That's part of that watch list year. And when they come out, I mean, everything you see on this list, they audit it. It's a great list for your safety inspections as well. The twice monthly, in 288, 115C 288, that you have to do a fire drill every month, but you have to do 2 safety inspections. I would do the full, if your district doesn't have a form, I would do the full long form on this one. Document these on paper and file them away. If there's ever a problem, it'll save you when you have to go to court. If there's a problem and somebody gets hurt in your facility, document that you were keeping it safe and that things were broken or weren't right, that you were getting them fixed in a regular, you put in work orders, get them taken care of. That's the corollary to this. If you find things that need to be fixed, you need to put in work orders to get them fixed. You can't just say, well, that's broken. Okay, it doesn't work. No. And then go on about your business. This audit pretends, this assessment inventory portends that if you find something wrong, you will take steps to fix it or mitigate it. That's the whole notion here with an assessment inventory, is you need to look at cars and buses and kids don't mix. That's the one that scares me the most. A lot of these you say, well, I don't have any, but I would note on a regular basis if something is missing here, something that we probably need to have, safety posters, those kinds of things, eye wash, chemical storage. One of the things that was aggravating about Charlotte Mecklenburg is custodians didn't work for the principal. They worked for the custodian department. And we were forever getting busted on them setting their chemicals out or leaving their storage closets open and things like that. But you've got to work with those people to get these problems and these issues taken care of. And then lastly, as I threatened earlier tonight, these are the things that on the TWC that you're going to get dinged on if you don't make sure that these things are taken care of. And so I've got, this is also under tonight. These are the things you better keep an eye out for on terms of your facilities and your resources. These are the things that teachers are going to get to rate you on. Basically, did you do these things on facilities and resources? Appropriate instructional materials and instructional technology, including computers, printers, software, internet access. That's why that principal up at Kaiser is trying to get trying to get more Chromebooks. He's going to get dinged if he's not, even though he didn't get the 15 at Christmas, we got 15. And so, he's doing his best. He's doing what he can. All these different things, office equipment, copy machines, paper, pens. That's what Dr. Tobias was talking about. You've got to set that in your budget up front, and then you've got some discretionary money to support your instructional initiatives. But you got to make sure you got the copy machine covered, those kinds of things. Your environment's clean and well maintained, and it's safe. Those kinds of things. So here are the things that you got to pay specific attention to in terms of your facilities and resources, because these are the things that the teachers are going to, as you all have been teachers at one time or another. These are the things that are going to be on TWC that you're going to get dinged for if you don't take care of these specific things. And it's hard, as Dr. Tobias and Dr. Massagill pointed out, if you're in low wealth, some of these things are hard enough to have enough money to pay the lease on the copy machine and the paper and the ink and all that. But that's your responsibility, is to figure out a way. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. I'm just telling you it's going to be your job to do. Questions on this? All right, so next week, we're going to shift gears a little bit next week. If you go back to, let me close that. If you go back to, we've kind of covered we'll do a little bit on the case study maybe next week, but we won't do a lot. But we kind of covered 2 weeks in one tonight. That's kind of, we've gone kind of fast. Next week, I want us to look at in our class shell. Let me close some of this stuff. Here we go. You see this that says interviewing materials? This link on our backboard page. We're going to cover this next week. We're going to do our interviewing session. It's getting to be that season where you folks are going to be finishing this summer. You will be eligible for, you will graduate on, I think it's August 1st, or complete. It's not really a graduation. On August 1st, you will be, and we can write you a verification letter, you will be eligible to be hired for the fall. I don't know what's going to happen with schools opening back up. They may need to get some more people, or how many people are going to retire. I suspect a lot of people are there's going to be a lot of movement over the summer. And so I always try to speed up toward the end and use a night to cover this, about the 4 types of interviews that you can expect if you are applying for an AP job. There's 4 separate and distinct types. Different districts use some form of or version of all of them. And we'll talk about those next week. I want to spend a night on interviewing. I would encourage you, if you're looking to move in the fall, to start now. Jobs are being posted. Some districts have applicant pools. You have to go through that process and get vetted and make the pool before you can apply for jobs. Now's the time to be looking at those things. And so that's what we'll be talking about next week. You put in all this hard work and time. We're going to try to help you in your quest to find that first administrative job. Questions you have for me? As always, I appreciate you being with us tonight. Thank our 2 experts for being with us as well. I will see you next Wednesday, and we'll talk about interviewing. So everybody have a good week and stay safe. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.